Ladies and gentlemen, this is TVP World. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and welcome aboard the Eastern Express. When a wartime leader reshuffles his inner circle, the world pays attention. When he does it while the battlefield map bleeds red, the stakes aren't just political, they're existential. Welcome to Ukraine's most critical personnel change since the tank rolled in over 3 years ago. Now, in wartime Ukraine, optics matter. So do allegiances. And when President Volodymyr Zelenskyy announced this week that he intends to replace Prime Minister Denys Shmyhal with Yulia Svyrydenko, we were witnessing more than a political reshuffle. So, without further ado, let's take a look at our latest report to find out more.
Ukraine's political scene is in for some big changes as Denys Shmyhal has submitted his resignation from the post of Prime Minister. This comes as a serious government reshuffle is taking place. This is not the first time that some changes have been made within the Ukrainian government since the start of the war. Previously, the country's defense and foreign ministers were swapped out. The major reshuffle on this scale has not taken place since the war's outbreak. As for Shmyhal's case, the reactions to his resignation on the street haven't been too flattering. After all, the president holds the most power in Ukraine.
To be honest, it doesn't really matter to me. I think it doesn't make much difference who's in that position. It won't significantly affect anything.
President Zelenskyy has tapped Yulia Svyrydenko, the country's Minister of the Economy, to lead the government. As for Shmyhal himself, there has been speculation that he might replace Rustem Umerov as Minister of Defense. Umerov himself is apparently being floated as becoming Ukraine's ambassador to the United States. For now, the new government's member list has not been disclosed.
And now let's zone in on the explaining portion of our show. Denys Shmyhal is Ukraine's longest-serving prime minister. He led the Ukrainian government since the start of the war, and his resignation is far from the end of his political career.
Denys Shmyhal's resignation did not come as a surprise to observers or Ukrainians alike. Although he served as prime minister since early 2020, his government did not enjoy high levels of support, unlike President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, who became a national icon in the wake of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. During his tenure, he not only oversaw the government during the war, but also during the coronavirus pandemic. As for what's next, Zelenskyy said that Shmyhal is expected to become the defense minister as part of the ongoing government reshuffle. His appointment to this post would come as the United States has shown renewed interest in supplying Ukraine with weapons and equipment so that it can defend itself against Russian attacks. As Minister of Defense, Shmyhal would play a crucial role in how these assets would be distributed across all the branches of the Ukrainian military.
And now let's take a look at the issue in greater detail. And let's start with the context. Denys Shmyhal has served as prime minister since before the full-scale invasion began. He's been, by most measures, competent and steady. However, his public approval was abysmal, with only 1 in 4 Ukrainians having trust in him. Now, without surprise, President Zelenskyy needed a new face to reflect renewed momentum. And that face belonged to Yulia Svyrydenko. Until now, first deputy prime minister and a familiar figure in Zelenskyy's inner circle. She played a leading role in negotiating the mineral deal with the Trump administration. The deal involves sharing profits from Ukraine's mineral wealth, was a precondition for further US military support. Zelenskyy, for his part, framed the move as a reboot of Ukraine's government. But opposition voices were quick to call it an attempt to tighten the president's control at a time when trust in government is being tested from both the trenches and the towns. The new prime minister isn't just stepping in as prime minister designate. She's already been involved in sensitive military-industrial talks. President Zelenskyy mentioned plans to expand domestic arms production and reinforce the country's social safety net. Ukraine's constitution grants the prime minister substantial control over domestic policy. Historically, the prime ministers often serve as institutional counterweights to the president, especially during moments of national strain. But Zelenskyy's Servant of the People Party holds a parliamentary majority, which brings us to the criticism. Zelenskyy's critic argued that this isn't a reform, but a reinforcement of his power. Recent polls show a notable drop in public confidence. The war that once united Ukrainians is beginning to strain their patience. This government reshuffle offers a clean slate. The question is whether the new page will be more supported by the society at large. And now, here to shed more light on the issue is Professor Alexei Haran, Research Director at Democratic Initiatives Foundation. Hello, sir, and welcome to Eastern Express.
Thank you for the invitation.
So today we're trying to examine the newest leadership shift in Ukraine, and what does that signal, be it both politically and also strategically for Ukraine?
Well, frankly speaking, most Ukrainian experts do not consider it as a strategic shift. I would say it's continuation of Ukrainian policy, of the policy of President Zelenskyy, and I explain you why. Because President Zelenskyy has a majority in the parliament, so it's not unilateral majority like it was right after elections in 2018 when his party controlled majority in the government, but it's enough to have situational majority in the parliament. And that's why, actually President Zelenskyy, despite the constitution, he has an upper hand over formation of the cabinet, because according to Ukrainian constitution, the cabinet is formed by the parliament, and president don't have any possibilities to dismiss it or influence appointments. But in reality, because he controls majority in the parliament, so he can control the cabinet as well. This was a situation under Prime Minister Shmyhal, and this will be the situation under Yulia Svyrydenko. So, the cabinet actually doesn't have, in this reality, an independent political role. The policy and politics is defined by president himself and by presidential office. It's also connected with the fact that we have a martial law, so it gives possibilities for tools for President Zelenskyy to control the cabinet. So, from political point of view, there will be no major changes. At the same time, there would be some reshuffles in the government, there would be some dismissals, definitely there would be a new blood as well, and Yulia Svyrydenko, she may be considered also as a new blood. Why I'm smiling? Because she is first deputy prime minister, so actually she has experience. And she has also experience of working together with presidential office, which is very important in Ukrainian situation. And the talks about Yulia Svyrydenko as prime minister, these talks are here for more than a year. So I wouldn't say it's unexpected decision. We need to take into account that Prime Minister Shmyhal was prime minister for 5 years. This is the longest time for the cabinet to stay, or prime minister to stay in independent Ukraine. So definitely, we do not have elections because of the war and because of the martial law. And at the same time, we need some changes. So that's the easiest way to do some changes to correct some policies, economic policy, other policies, and that's why it is a change. By the way, Denys Shmyhal, Prime Minister, he will be reshuffled to the position of Minister of Defense, so he will keep very important position in the cabinet.
All right, so we are taking a look at a more international perspective, and a lot of pundits as well as commentators are trying to read the tea leaves and drawing to the conclusion that perhaps Ukraine is shifting from a more trenches approach to a more spreadsheet one, citing the new incoming prime minister as someone who's contributed a lot to the mineral deal with the United States, and perhaps signaling a closer relation with the upcoming administration and taking a more diplomatic approach towards the U.S. as well. Do you think there's any validity to that?
Well, again, look, the sphere of national security and foreign affairs, by the way, like in Poland, it's in the hands of mostly in the hands of president. The role of cabinet is very important, but mostly it's in the hand of president. And actually, this is two exceptions in the formation of the government, because the candidates for Ministry of Foreign Affairs and for Ministry of Defense are submitted by president himself. The parliament only approve or disapprove. Okay, so the political course, geopolitical course, relations with United States as well as other countries, they are defined not in the cabinet, but by president himself. So again, so I do not see this as a strategic change. But definitely there would be some new approaches. Again, this is a new blood. Yulia Svyrydenko, she has experience of dealing with, of having negotiations and very tough negotiations with the U.S. You have mentioned a critical minerals deal. It's controversial, and it's accepted in Ukraine as a necessity, because we need to keep a good relations with the Trump administration. But the first draft, which was initially submitted to Ukraine by Americans, it was unacceptable for Ukraine, and there were long and tough negotiations, and Yulia Svyrydenko participated in that. So she can deal with Washington. Definitely it will be a plus, I think.
Right. So like you mentioned, perhaps it is more domestic politics oriented decision than an international one. So if we look a little bit into this, there's also critics on the other side arguing that at a time where the trust in government is being tested, this could be seen as a move from Zelenskyy to consolidate his power even further, seeing that the newly appointed prime minister has very strong ties with the presidential office already. Do you think that is a valid concern?
Well, actually, Shmyhal was also very closely tied to presidential office, and he was very, very cautious. He wasn't visible in media. By the way, Yulia Svyrydenko is visible in media. So Shmyhal was very, very loyal, and the power was consolidated under president. In this sense, there would be no change. So let's be clear about that. So again, Yulia Svyrydenko will perform the political will of Zelenskyy and his office. But as I have said, technically, she may give a new blood to the policies in some specific spheres, like economy and other issues as well. But again, in general, from technical point of view, yes, this is a cabinet who will do that. Okay, and yes, here we have a blue blood, fresh blood. But again, the policy, the basic policy, is designed by president himself.
And you mentioned earlier as well that Denys Shmyhal is going to be taking the role of the defense minister. Do you think that in and of itself will also inject some new energy within the defense sector as well?
Not well. I think, look, with former ministers, there were some connected with former minister, who is, by the way, will be sent as an ambassador to Washington. There were quite a lot of criticism, and so in this situation, perhaps the change of the Minister of Defense would mean that possibility to avoid the scandals and to be maybe more effective. Again, as I have said, Minister of Defense Umerov, who is Crimean Tatar, by the way, and one of the leaders of Crimean Tatars. So he was involved in negotiations also on different levels with Russia and with United States regarding the war. Recently, he was a head of Ukrainian delegation in Jeddah, in Istanbul. So we are saying that he was too busy with negotiations. As negotiator, he is considered to be quite well, and it gave him, less time to concentrate on the work of Ministry of Defense. So I think, Shmyhal will be more able to concentrate on defense, on ministry itself, because he isn't involved in diplomatic negotiations with Russia or the US.
Right. Last but not least, like you mentioned, perhaps a lot of these decisions were actually more of a continuity base and more focused around domestic politics. But we here in the West have also seen a lot of kind of trying to interpret these changes. Do you think that there is going to be, well, at least optically, seem like there's some change within and might affect relations with different international partners, specifically United States?
Well, again, we in Ukraine do not see much changes, but again, there would be new blood. I can only repeat myself. And Yulia Svyrydenko, she has the experience of dealing with many countries, with the United States, also with the EU countries. So maybe this would be a new possibility to develop these relations as well. So she showed herself as an effective negotiator and effective manager. So perhaps this would be a positive change.
All right. Thank you so much for your input and insight. Really appreciate it. And thanks for being with us on Eastern Express.
Thank you.
And now we're moving on to the Eastern News Flash, a series of all the other stories from the East that you don't want to miss. Ukraine's parliament has passed a bill suspending the country's participation in the Ottawa Convention. The agreement bans the use of anti-personnel mines.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has justified the decision by reminding that Russia had never joined the convention and uses anti-personnel mines with a severe disregard for casualties. He also believes that by taking this step, Ukraine will be able to achieve some sort of parity in forces and tools to defend against the Russian invasion. Anti-personnel mines are scattered all over the battlefields in Ukraine. Both soldiers and civilians often lose limbs due to their detonations. Territories that have been liberated by Ukraine have to be swept clean of the mines, a very costly, time-consuming and dangerous process. The 1997 Ottawa Convention, party to 160 countries, bans the use, production, stockpiling and even transfer of all anti-personnel landmines. Its goal is to protect civilians from the explosives, which could still injure them long after a conflict has been ended.
China seems to have responded to Donald Trump's plan to return to the strategy of arming Ukraine. Xi Jinping has called for a deepening of relations between China and Russia.
Highly respected by...
After months of unsuccessfully attempting to bring Russia to the negotiating table, Donald Trump announced the delivery of new Patriot air defense systems to Ukraine and a new deal with NATO under which member states will pay for US weapons for Kyiv. China, on the other hand, seems keen on improving its already quite deep ties with Russia. During a recent meeting with the Russian Foreign Minister, Xi Jinping declared that the two countries must boost their strategic partnership. He also said that the two countries should lead the way for the so-called Global South to establish a more, quote, just international order. China has become Russia's largest trading partner and closest ally since the start of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Beijing has been instrumental in helping Moscow withstand economic pressure created by Western sanctions.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has signed a law which permits Ukrainian citizens to hold more than one citizenship. Previously, Ukrainian law did not allow Ukrainian passport holders to obtain a new nationality.
The new law goes both ways. Ukrainians can obtain new citizenships, and foreigners who would like to obtain a Ukrainian one will not have to give up any of their current nationalities. There are some restrictions, however. The other citizenships can only come from a select list of approved nationalities, although this selection is not yet available to the public. The list of countries from which foreigners can obtain Ukrainian citizenship will be determined at a later date, and will be based on their status within the EU and whether they have a history of supporting the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The citizens of countries considered unfriendly to Ukraine will still be required to announce their native citizenships within 2 years of applying for a Ukrainian passport. The exceptions to this rule are, among others, refugees, asylum seekers, contract soldiers in the Ukrainian armed forces, and any person awarded for significant service to Ukraine.
And that's all on this episode of Eastern Express. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.